Blake's laughter shattered the silence of the packed auditorium, like glass hitting concrete. On stage, Elena's calloused fingers gripped the microphone stand, her mud-stained boots planted wide against the polished porcelain floor. The Silicon Valley elite in their $1,000 suits leaned back in red velvet chairs, titanium watches catching the harsh spotlight that made Elena's flannel shirt look gray and worn. Blake Morrison's smirk stretched wider as he adjusted his Hermes tie, the sound of his amusement bouncing off crystal chandeliers. "Sweetheart, this is TechCrunch Disrupt, not a county fair." Elena's jaw tightened, but her voice cut through the murmurs like a blade through silk. The audience of venture capitalists, tech executives, and startup founders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some pulled out phones to record what they assumed would be another viral failure moment. Others whispered behind manicured hands, their breath misting against champagne glasses still half full from the networking reception. Elena didn't flinch. She clicked her laptop, and a holographic projection filled the air above her, molecular structures dancing in blue light like fireflies trapped in amber. The unexpected display caused several audience members to lower their phones, curiosity temporarily overriding their judgment. 3 years ago, my family farm was dying. Corn yields dropping 20% annually. Soil depleted from decades of synthetic fertilizers and climate stress. My grandmother Carmen, who'd worked this land for 60 years, was ready to sell to developers. Elena's voice carried the weight of generational heartbreak, each word deliberate as a farmer's steps through morning frost. The holographic molecules rotated slowly, their structure mesmerizing even to the tech-saturated crowd. Elena manipulated the display with practiced precision, zooming into microscopic details that revealed intricate biological machinery. That winter, I spent months in our oldest field. Not running soil samples for nutrient deficiency, I'd done that 100 times. Instead, I was looking for something my agricultural science professors said didn't exist. A symbiotic organism that my great-grandmother used to whisper about, stories I dismissed as folklore. Blake rolled his eyes theatrically, playing to the crowd. Here we go. Another miracle microbe that's going to save the world. Several audience members chuckled, but the sound felt forced now. Elena's presentation had an unexpected gravitas that made mockery feel smaller, meaner. Not just any microbe, Elena continued, her voice gaining the steady power of someone who'd spent years proving herself in rooms where she didn't belong. This organism can triple crop yields while requiring 70% less water. It repairs depleted soil in months, not decades. And it does something that has every agricultural scientist I've contacted calling me crazy. She paused, her eyes scanning the room with the patience of someone who'd learned to read skepticism in every line of a banker's face, every furrow of a loan officer's brow. The pause stretched long enough for the audience to lean forward despite themselves. It converts atmospheric nitrogen so efficiently that crops grown with it require no synthetic fertilizers. Zero. The murmurs in the audience grew louder now, less dismissive. James Chun, sitting in the front row, leaned forward with the intensity of a hunting dog catching scent. The biotechnology reporter had covered agricultural breakthroughs for 15 years, from genetically modified crops to vertical farming innovations, and something in Elena's voice made his journalistic instincts tingle like electricity before a storm. Behind him, Dr. Sarah Kim, the evening's moderator, glanced nervously at her notes. This wasn't the gentle failure she'd expected to shepherd through to its inevitable conclusion. The holographic display continued to rotate, and several audience members had pulled out notebooks, actual paper notebooks, not phones, and were scribbling calculations. Elena clicked to the next slide, revealing field photographs that looked like something from an alien planet. Corn stalks stretched impossibly tall, their leaves a vibrant green that seemed to pulse with life even in the static images. The soil beneath them looked rich and dark as chocolate cake, nothing like the pale, exhausted earth that characterized most Midwest farmland. The best part. Elena's smile was razor-sharp now, the expression of someone who'd been underestimated once too often. This organism thrives in the exact soil conditions created by climate change. Rising temperatures, erratic rainfall, higher CO2 levels, all the things killing traditional agriculture are feeding my discovery. Blake's smirk faltered like a candle guttering in wind. His hand instinctively moved to his phone, fingers hovering over the screen as if calculating something urgent. Around the auditorium, the atmosphere had shifted. What began as entertainment was morphing into something that smelled suspiciously like legitimate disruption. That's impossible," Blake stammered, his practiced confidence cracking like ice on a warming pond. "You're describing something that violates basic principles of..." Dr. Blake Morrison, Ph.D. in biochemical engineering from MIT, published researcher on soil microbiomes, owner of Morrison Agricultural Ventures. Elena's voice cut through his interruption like a scythe through wheat, each credential landing with surgical precision. "Yes, I know exactly who you are. I also know you've been buying up failing farms across the Midwest for the past 2 years." The auditorium fell dead silent. Blake's face drained of color, his olive complexion turning the pale gray of old concrete. His lawyer, David Park, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, one hand already reaching for his briefcase. Elena's fingers danced across her laptop keyboard with the fluidity of a concert pianist. Curious strategy for someone who supposedly believes traditional farming is obsolete. Unless, of course, you already knew what I just discovered. Unless your failed investments in farmland weren't failures at all, but strategic acquisitions based on proprietary research stolen from small farmers like my family. The holographic display shifted, molecular structures dissolving into financial documents that hung in the air like accusations. Purchase agreements, soil analysis reports, patent applications, all bearing the Morrison Agricultural Ventures logo. The papers rotated slowly, giving everyone in the auditorium time to read the damning details. Blake shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the marble floor with a sound like fingernails on glass. "That's completely unfounded, those documents are public record," Elena finished smoothly. "Morrison Agricultural Ventures, patent application 2024-7419. Filed 6 months ago. Novel nitrogen-fixing soil organism for enhanced crop production. Curious timing, considering you only visited my farm 8 months ago." She clicked again, and the holographic display expanded, showing a map of the Midwest dotted with red pins. Each pin represented a farm Morrison's company had purchased or attempted to purchase in the past 2 years. The pattern was unmistakable, a systematic acquisition of properties along specific geological lines. "Funny thing about soil organisms," Elena continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years with dirt under her fingernails while others theorized in sterile laboratories. "They're highly location-specific. The organism I discovered doesn't just exist on my family's farm. It exists along a particular geological formation that runs through 7 states. The crowd erupted in chaos. James Chun was already typing furiously on his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he live-tweeted the unfolding drama. Sarah Kim struggled to maintain order, her voice lost in the rising tide of outraged voices throughout the auditorium. Blake's lawyer, David Park, was whispering urgently in his ear, but Elena wasn't finished. She stood perfectly still at the podium, waiting for the crowd to quiet enough to hear her final revelations. When the noise died to an expectant hush, her voice somehow carried over the remaining murmurs with the clarity of church bells across winter air. "The organism chooses its host soil," she said, each word dropping like stones into still water. "It can't be extracted, synthesized, or replicated in laboratories. Every attempt fails within 72 hours. The only way to access this technology is through partnership with the farmers whose land it inhabits." She advanced to the next slide, showing laboratory reports from 3 different agricultural research facilities. All bore the same conclusion: the organism died within days when removed from its native environment, despite every attempt to recreate the precise soil conditions. "And every farm you've been secretly buying?" Elena's gaze locked onto Blake's pale face. "Every contract you've been manipulating with below-market offers? They all sit on land where this organism naturally occurs. You've been trying to monopolize a discovery you could never legally own." Blake's face had gone from pale to red, the color of a man whose carefully constructed empire was crumbling in real time. His business partner, Trevor Wilson, stood near the back exit, phone pressed to his ear as he fielded angry calls from investors who were watching the live stream. The holographic display showed one final image, a comparative analysis of crop yields from farms along the geological formation. The pattern was undeniable. Every farm Morrison had targeted showed the same mysterious improvement in productivity that Elena had discovered on her family's land. "You see," Elena continued, her voice now carrying the quiet satisfaction of justice served cold, "when you started visiting farms, claiming to be interested in sustainable agriculture partnerships, you weren't just making offers. You were taking soil samples, running tests. identifying which properties hosted the organism. Security guards appeared at the edges of the auditorium as the crowd's murmurs grew more agitated. Blake's attempt to leave was blocked by a wall of reporters and investors who suddenly wanted answers to very pointed questions. Your research was solid, Dr. Morrison. But your ethics were garbage. And more importantly, you fundamentally misunderstood what you were trying to steal. Elena clicked to her final slide. Instead of complex molecular structures or financial documents, the display showed a simple photograph, an elderly Latina woman in a sun-faded dress, standing in a cornfield with her weathered hands resting on a wooden fence post. This is my grandmother, Carmen Vasquez. She never went to MIT. Never published research papers. Never raised millions in venture capital. But she understood something you never will. The organism doesn't respond to ownership. It responds to stewardship. The auditorium had gone completely silent now, the kind of profound quiet that falls over a room when everyone realizes they're witnessing something historic. Carmen used to tell me that the land remembers how you treat it. I thought it was just another one of her old stories. But when I started studying the organism's behavior patterns, I realized she was describing actual biological processes. The organism doesn't just improve soil conditions, it evaluates them. It thrives under farmers who work with the ecosystem rather than against it. It dies under industrial agriculture practices. Blake made another attempt to leave, but James Chun blocked his path with a digital recorder and a predatory smile. That's why your patent application will fail, Dr. Morrison. You can't patent a partnership. And more importantly, every farm you tried to buy is now part of a class action lawsuit that my legal team filed this morning. Elena's smile was radiant now, the expression of someone who'd been playing chess while her opponent thought they were playing checkers. 43 legitimate investment firms have contacted me since this presentation began. But more importantly, 87 farmers from across the Midwest have reached out. They all have the same story: mysterious improvements in their soil, better yields despite climate stress, and visits from Morrison's people trying to buy their land for pennies on the dollar. As Elena spoke, security finally succeeded in escorting Blake from the auditorium, his expensive suit rumpled and his confidence shattered. Trevor Wilson followed, still fielding calls from investors who were demanding immediate answers about their portfolio companies' sudden legal and ethical problems. 3 hours later, Elena sat in a quiet coffee shop 6 blocks from the auditorium, her laptop finally closed and her presentation materials packed away. Across from her sat Grace Thompson, the lead science writer for the Wall Street Journal, her digital recorder sitting between Elena's coffee cup and her own leather-bound notebook. The contrast between the two women was stark but somehow complementary. Elena in her cleaned-up flannel shirt and jeans, Grace in her tailored blazer and pearls. But both wore the satisfied expression of professionals who just witnessed something extraordinary. So what happens now? Grace asked, her pen poised over a page already half-filled with notes. Elena smiled, the same razor-sharp expression that had cut through Blake's facade, but now softened with something that looked like hope. Now? Carmen gets to keep her farm. And every small farmer whose land hosts this organism gets to be a partner, not a victim. She pulled out her phone, showing Grace a screen full of missed calls and messages. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of communications in just a few hours. The legal team estimates Morrison Agricultural Ventures stock will drop another 20% before markets close. Their patent application will be challenged in court next week, and the FBI has opened an investigation into their land acquisition practices. Elena leaned back in her chair, exhaustion finally showing in her posture. Funny how quickly venture capitalists stop laughing when their own fraud gets exposed. Grace nodded, scribbling notes with the focused intensity of someone who recognized a career-defining story. What about the farmers? The ones Morrison was targeting. They're forming a cooperative. Shared resources, shared knowledge, shared profits. The organism seems to respond even better when the host farms are connected, literally. We're seeing yield improvements spread from farm to neighboring farm when they coordinate their planting cycles. Elena stood, leaving a $5 tip despite her coffee costing $3, the gesture of someone who'd been broke long enough to remember what generosity cost. The organism doesn't just choose its soil, Grace. It chooses its people. And it chose farmers who've spent generations nurturing the land, not exploiting it. As Elena walked toward the door, Grace called after her with the one question that would make her story complete. One more question: what are you calling this discovery? Elena turned back, her flannel shirt somehow looking less out of place in the Silicon Valley coffee shop than Blake's $1,000 suit had looked in her world of morning chores and evening storms. Carmen's gift, she said. Named after the woman who taught me that the best technology isn't the newest, it's the one that takes care of people. Outside, the California evening was settling into that golden hour that made even strip malls look magical. Elena walked toward her borrowed truck, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder and her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. Tomorrow, she would fly back to Iowa, back to the farm that would now never be sold to developers. Back to soil that held secrets older than venture capital and more powerful than patents. Behind her, Grace Thompson was already typing on her laptop, crafting the story that would run on the Journal's front page and trigger congressional hearings about agricultural fraud. But Elena wasn't thinking about headlines or legal victories. She was thinking about spring planting season, and the dozens of farmers who would soon understand that the earth beneath their feet held more wisdom than all the boardrooms in Silicon Valley combined.